Hmm.
Howdy, howdy, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out. I'm BTEX. I am an analytical chemist. The last time I gave a lecture, it was about analytical testing of cannabis. That's what I do in the technical part of my life, professional part of my life. And on the moonlight hours, I do sports sword fighting. I've wanted to give this lecture for quite a while now, but let's be real, it's a little out of left field for what DGen Tech is. And for everybody who's watching on the stream, DGen Tech, it's what this meetup is for. It's what this lecture series is kind of to help support. DGen Tech is a group of professional working furs in the STEM fields, STEM being science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medical. So basically, we're some of the techiest furs you're going to meet. And of course, like all good techie furs, we meet on virtual reality and we hang out on Discord. We hang out in the virtual space while watching movies and teaching each other our weird cross-disciplinary skills and all of that. And one of the big things that we do at DGen Tech is we have a lecture series. So we just get one member of the community to talk about what they do. And this is a whole half of my life. And I hope you guys enjoy this little view into some what is probably still considered a niche hobby, despite its historicity and widespread appeal. To the audience who grew up as a child hitting your siblings with sticks, pretending you were a knight or a bandit or something, right? I know you're supposed to grow out of it, but one of the joys about becoming an adult is that you learn you can do what you want, really. So if you enjoyed hitting your younger brother with a stick, you can grow up, put on some, protective equipment, sign a waiver, and hit your friends with sticks, and it's totally fine. All right. And that's what this lecture is about. It's not about how to sword fight. It's not about like how real or fake Hollywood is. No. It's just how you, the viewer, can come in and join on what is a whole culture and lifestyle, really. And I do the sports side of it. I'm going to get into the nuances a lot, but I've been a sport sword fighter for the majority of my life. And I've done kind of a lot by now. I've bounced around from one thing to another. So I wanted to put in a little bit of what my kind of fight resume is. So I started as a fencer, what some people refer to as an Olympic fencer. I started elementary school in the 5th grade. I went competitive in high school, effectively. Like many kids, I was trying to get into a good college. And that's where things like really started to branch off. I really enjoyed the martial aspect, like you're trying to outdo somebody, the physicality of it. But competitive life is tough. So after I got into my competitive life, starting in middle school, I got into LARPing. The first one I got into was Dagger Here off of a suggestion from an online friend of mine who knew that I did fencing and was like, hey, I do DAG. This will probably be right up your alley. And boy, certainly was. And that kind of really opened the doors from something that I enjoyed to a whole lifestyle that I really have come to love and live. And yeah, like I was part of clubs. I started a fencing club in high school, and then in college, I went and I continued my competitive streak. I was the men's épée captain in college. I helped run the stuff. It taught me a lot of organizational skills, including the LARP that I did in high school. And in college, I branched into the SCA. I'll get into what that means later, and other styles of steel combat. In post-college, the dreary doldrums of, oh, geez, I'm actually an adult. After getting my bearings socially, financially, and professionally, I went right back to it. Kept fencing, kept doing Belagarth, which was the LARP that I did. I played around with the SCA a bit, moved on to Adrian Empire. There was a group I ran with called Fireblood in the Las Vegas area. And really in the post-college phase, there's a lot of fun, merriment, and alcoholism, because when you change from something competitive, you try to do something more socially. Moved up to become the Weed Wizard of Al Medina. I replaced Melee Moses, who is actually currently the captain of the Brisbane Beasts. And if I don't suspect the audience would find this very funny, but anybody who actually knows who this person is and what these people are, that is a hilarious. Melee Moses abdicated his position. I'm the one who picked it up, and he does not hold a candle to me at all as the weed wizard. Ever since then, though, I've been just kind of in a weird, I'm just kind of doing what I want. I've kind of left the competitive scene, and now I've been putting a lot of my focus towards degen tech, the virtual reality space, the virtual self that you see here. So in the last few years, my resume has been getting a little spottier. I'm still active. I still try my best to stay in shape, but injuries stacked up over time. And I wanted to go through this first, just so everybody knows what my background is. I should also mention I competed in HEMA at Combat Con. Competed in SCA, competed in EMP a bit, just in a bunch of different games. And I've been trying to get into Buhurt as well. I've been training with some people for it, but haven't been competitive there. Anyways, I really wanted to get into my background just so you know where I'm coming from. So what I do know versus what I don't know. I hit people with sticks. I can go into the historicity, but that's not what I specialize in. I can go into like a lot of the nuances and the cultures in the games, which I definitely will get into, but I just know how to hit people with sticks. That's my thing. I've been doing it for 20 plus years. I don't get to show it off in VR because I can't actually touch any of you. But if you ever meet me in person, it's a thing that I love bringing my friends over to try. Take them to, whatever event that's happening in the local area. I like to hit my friends. That is my love language. All right. And so if there's anything that I misrepresent or say wrong, which is completely possible, but I also will fight about it. And if you don't like it, you can fight me about it. Literally come on over. We can exchange some bruises and see who's right. I welcome and relish the opportunity. All right. Now, can't dwell too long. We got a number of slides to go into. So, sword fighting in the modern day, I always have to start with Kendo, which I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage here because Kendo is one of the only ones that I haven't done. But it is by far, by none, the largest modern sports sword fighting system in the world. All right. This is based from Japanese styles of sword fighting, loosely from samurai culture. Became sportified and ratified in the modern day with a lot of sport organizations. There's you'll see a theme with some of these modern systems that there was a transition from old warrior training, basically to produce soldiers, to modern sport, which people do for health, for fun, and self-disciplinary reasons. And oftentimes the world wars are actually the transition point for a lot of these. And I believe Kendo is no exception to this, where after World War II, it became much more ratified as a sport instead of like a cultural practice or just straight up martial practice to train up soldiers. Because, obviously in the modern day with gunpowder, you don't really need to have sword fighting ready soldiers anyways. But this is where it comes from. I wanted to show how some of the armor is there. It has very traditional sort of stylings to deal with its own system of abstraction of sword fighting. Everything that is sword fighting needs to have some sort of safety system built in. So they have flexible wooden shinai, which are made from bamboo slats. They flex a lot. And then they wear lacquered wood, at least that's what it is traditionally, lacquered wood protective equipment around the main target areas. Notice that in this photo, like you can still see some skin there. They're safe in terms of they're not going to get any serious injury, but no injury is generally out of the question. You're still going to get bruises. Occasionally you can get cut with the slats because they pinch in a certain way. So it's still a martial art. And Kendo is a sporty style of martial art. There's a lot of philosophy of what's a true martial art, what's a sport, whatever. I kind of don't care. I just like to hit people. So this is a little bit of both. It's not purely one or the other. Okay, so let's see. Yes, and this is everything you're going to see is just a very modern version of what's a very old practice. And I did fight a number of Kendo practitioners. I am going to say something that'll anger some people. They're not bad. Kendo practitioners are not bad. They have a very regimented way of training, which can be difficult for new practitioners of Kendo to get, quote, good. So they tend to have a slower start than what I've seen with Western style of practice and games. But long-term Kendo practitioners, they tend to be very good because there's a strong emphasis on very repeat and rote repetition of the basics, which is absolutely a way to become a top tier fighter. It just is unfortunately lame and boring and takes a long time. But hey, welcome to martial arts. There's a lot of self-discipline and practice necessary. All right. And that's, again, the largest one in the world by far. The next largest one is fencing. Sometimes they disambiguate it as Olympic fencing. This is Western-styled sword fighting. This is very abstracted. This is very sporty. It is only on a technicality could be considered a martial art. But this is the cultural successor to European sword fighting. There were a number of different schools and styles in the many countries of Europe. And basically, once again, around World War I was a major transition point where fencing went from a military practice to train up soldiers and maybe persons of noble birth or aristocratic birth to becoming a sport for people's self-interest, self-discipline, health, and wellness, and all of that. All right. So this one I couldn't get an actual number on, which I was a little surprised by, but the practitioners are probably in around 1 million persons would be my guess, while Kendo had many millions of persons. This is the FIE, the Federation International de Esgrima, is the main international body, but each country has a sub-organization for fencing. One of the reasons why it's so hard to get consistent numbers, but they all have almost the exact same consistent rules. So this is, again, very abstract, very stabbing based, and we have 3 styles of swords, which is epee, saber, and foil. And each one has a different background. Foil came from the aristocratic class of using small swords. Saber came from the military class where cavalrymen were expected to use sabers and also know how to duel with sabers. And then epee is very loosely based off of rapier and civilian-styled fencing, which would be, quote, the common man's self-defense. And there's still some application in the modern day, but this is really a sport which is for its own dedicated self. You get fantastic timing, conditioning, athleticism, distance control, footwork is considered very good in fencing. It is literally, by the way, the fastest sport. Arguably, if you consider it a martial art, it is the fastest martial art because the fastest moving object in sports is a rifle bullet. The second fastest moving object in sports is the tip of a fencing blade. It is insanely fast, and I cannot stress that enough. The amount of intuition and reflexes you need to be competitive in the sport is pushing the human limit. And this is what I've done for since I was a young child. I got into competitive fencing, and this is what I did for a long time. I wore those white clothing. I did epee, which is the exact same blade type that you see in the photo. And this has been a huge part of my life. So modern fencing uses certain technologies to help with scoring. It uses an electronic reel system and scoring system where it has these cables connected to the blades, connected to the reels, which can also, the lame, this silver jacket, it's infused with a metal fabric that allows conductivity. The saber wears a jacket, which is covering the red area, along with a special metallic styled helm or mask. The foil, which is this one, has the target area over the chest alone, and you wear a lame on that. And the epee, because it has a full body target, which is the one up there, that one doesn't use a lame. It has a somewhat simpler electronic system, but the takeaway is that these guys use an electronic scoring system to be very exact on the timing of who gets the point, because double touches, simultaneous death in sword fighting is actually very common. So each of these systems have some mechanism to prevent double touches, simultaneous death, whatever you want to call it. And fencing uses an electronic scoring system. So in some ways, this could also be considered the most modern style because of the inclusion of a scoring system, which Kendo and the other systems you'll see, as far as I'm aware, do not have electronic scoring systems. So there are some definite advantages to what I call Olympic fencing. It's also what I have the most experience with. I stab great. All right. So now onto the different styles of sword fighting. And I have to start with the Society of Creative Anachronism, which is a LARP, a live action role play. This is the oldest. Technically, there's older LARPs than the SCA, but this is the oldest, still like hugely active, very influential. It is the biggest LARP in the United States. This was established in 1966. They had a tournament, and they had so much fun doing it that they just kept doing it. And this is using a rattan system with steel armor for protection. They protect the limbs, joints, spine, head. That's it. And basically, they just hit each other with sticks. But a big part of this is also there's a whole culture behind it. It is not just the sword fighting. My interest is the sword fighting, but this is an entire hobby. This is something that you can spend your entire life on and in and meet a whole different type of people that you probably would never meet outside of this sort of or similar type of organizations. So there is fighting. Yes, of course, but there's also camping, crafting, historicity, alcohol, food, and revelry. And there's plenty of each one of those points at these camps and events. And before I was spending a lot of my time on VR, I would be going to those sort of events as my main use of my PTO. And if I ever had any good, fun, long weekends that I didn't really have anything scheduled on. Okay. Let's go to, so here's some photos of what this equipment looks like. We have fighting in terms of they have basic metal armor, but their weapons are rattan. They are wooden. And the big thing that's different from the other martial arts, a lot of martial arts are one-on-one fights. This is a field fight. You get all your lads together and you go crump those other gits across the field and you take victory and get honor from the crown. It really is a whole package because you go camping, you wake up in the morning, you get breakfast in a field kitchen, you get your armor on, you go to the field, you go hit people until you're exhausted, take lunch, and then go back to hitting people. Maybe there's some tournaments, maybe there's some games. And then as night falls, you can keep fighting if you find the people, or you can go off and have revelry. And I'm sure at some point in that whole juncture before you go to bed, there'll be plenty of alcohol and revelry and anything else that you may enjoy while hanging out with your friends in the middle of the woods. Because a big part of the SCA is also the culture of they have camps, they have kitchens, they have crafting, they have clothing. That all is something to learn how to do, spend time, and to really augment your life with. Some of the coolest clothing I have that makes me actually feel good about myself is from these sort of communities. But I have to start with the SCA before I can talk about a lot of these other ones, because this is the grandfather of all LARPs in the United States. I'm not as familiar with other LARPs in Europe. I know that they also have a lot of historicity, but you cannot talk about everything else without the SCA. Because what that did was kind of formalize and begin the normalization of live action role play, which is, what is it? It's kind of like what you kind of want it to be. You have live action, and then it's kind of on a spectrum of live action to role play. And a lot of people mistake that because it's a LARP, it is a purely role play kind of thing. I am a wizard. I can throw magic balls at you and defeat you using a point system. No, these LARP systems, they also tend to be full contact. And once you have the tools in hand, you can kind of determine the rules. And when you realize it from that auspice, you realize that there's a huge diversity in what a LARP is. You have LARPs, which can be used for combat training for actual soldiers, and then you have LARPs where they literally will not allow you to touch somebody else for the sake of safety of combatants, or safety of players, I should say. And you have everything in between. And once again, I kind of stick on the sports side of it, but there are a lot of LARPs that have more gameplay elements. And I'm sure that a lot of you people have seen the online videos of the lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. That's one system. I'm not even sure if that was Amped Guard. It might have been a narrow game. But Amped Guard has magic systems. Belagarth does not. We'll get into it. Belagarth, Amped Guard. Our Amped Guard is definitely the biggest Boffer LARP, the foam LARP in the world right now. Dagger here used to be a big one, but it's defunct. Won't get into it. Narrow, Hearthlight, many, many more. Tons of homebrews. There is a huge diversity to these games. And Europe, they have Drachenfest, which by member of attendance is absolutely the largest one. And it is a global phenomenon. There are Asian guilds and groups. I just am not as familiar with them because I don't go to Asia to fight. I fight in the US. All right. Okay, and now that I talked about LARPing, Buhurt is one that a lot of people mistake as something that is a real fighting, a real martial art. It's actually a LARP. Surprise, they're role-playing as knights. But these guys, and I'm going to show, there's going to be, these guys are the ones who wear full armor, all right? Head to toe, thick, not just armor, but thick, heavy, like 2.5, 3 millimeter stainless steel armor. They spend thousands of dollars on these suits. Furries aren't the only ones with expensive suits. And they use it and they need that expensive suit because they genuinely beat the schnoz out of each other. They got steel weapons, steel armor. These guys are huge, strong guys, and they get real titanium grafted on their bones when they break them. Concussions happen somewhat frequently. Injuries happen somewhat frequently. It is a safe sport. Don't let me oversell it too much. There are safety mechanisms in play, but this is definitely one of the highest intensity versions of LARPing. You need that armor because there are no force limits. If you can knock your opponent out, go ahead and try. Now, they're wearing a helmet, so it's really, really hard, but if you can do it, do it. And this is what a lot of people will think is their like least LARPy LARP, but it's still absolutely a LARP. Because you need historical authenticity. I kid you not, if you're in an actual tournament and you do not have historicity documents showing that your shoes on your outfit are historically accurate, they may actually remove you from the field. That is absolutely a thing. All right. But these guys are the ones who slam each other. They do not mess around. If you can hit them as hard as you want. And the goal of this is to knock down the opponent. As soon as they're on the ground, they're out, you won. There is pain compliance as well, where they just put themselves out by laying on the floor, basically. They fight in what's called a list, which I call a human cattle pen, but this is the ring, right? This is where all the action takes place. If you get knocked out in some way, which is very difficult to happen, you're out. Really what happens is people tend to hang on to the list and then to prevent themselves from getting knocked down. But if you're getting hit with a pole arm, it hurts, and you may just lay down anyways. I also wanted to explicitly put in some soft armor, because a lot of people think that foam equals nerds throwing birdseed at each other and saying lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. No, these guys use it too because it's an effective training system. They use this because armor is expensive. It takes time to put on, and foam is a lot cheaper, lighter, and easier to work with. And as long as you're working within the confines of foam, the risks are relatively low compared to work, and the costs are low and the risks are low compared to working with steel systems. All right, so these super strong guys who beat the tar out of each other, they absolutely still use foam. All right. And here's a photo of some of the lads that I used to work with back in Vegas. All right. A lot of questions you want to ask. What are the differentiations between these different systems and games? Do you have magic? Do you have hit points? What's the goal? Are you just trying to win? Who are you? That's a big identifier of a LARP. Are you you, or are you playing a role of what you wish to be? Or maybe something like, maybe you have some specific character with like points and character stats and all of that. These are questions that will help disambiguate whether or not you have a LARP. A lot of gear, if you think about a lot of this gear, you don't actually use real swords. Real swords are expensive, they dull, they break. You use a lot of blunted equipment, something that's springy, maybe foam. Is it something that's supposed to be analogous to a real weapon, or is it something that's a completely unique thing where, like, what people call like shouting weapons, where, hi, I hit you, you're down, right? That's one extreme. The other extreme is I just have a blunted sword, and if I hit you strong enough to knock you down, you're down. A big question is, how intense of play do you actually want? Is this an exercise thing? Is this a martial arts thing for you? What are you trying to get out of it? There's a lot of cultural elements like historicity, character play. What can you, do you have to be historical? Do they allow like cool characters, or is it like fully cosplayable where you can show up as SpongeBob and they won't kick you out of the event? Some events will, some events won't. right? And then there's the culture of how in these sports, what is allowed and what's not. Like when I did Olympic fencing, I couldn't go to parties. I couldn't show up to a tournament drunk. They would kick me out. But you go to some of these other LARPs. Sometimes, I mean, you're not supposed to drink while fighting, but like, can you drink after the fight? Can you party and whatnot? Like, what are the tolerances for activities? And a lot of these, part of it is you're meeting your friends. It's kind of like at a fur con. It's kind of like meeting at a fur con that you're there to meet with your friends that you only get to see once in a while. So of course you're going to party and have a bunch of revelry. I like to also make a comparison to things like airsoft and paintball. People don't really think of those as LARPs, but they actually are LARPs, but in different styles. Airsoft, you can kind of pretend to be a soldier, with paintball being definitely a sport where it's more point-based, but you're still kind of doing an abstract representation of a shooting sport, of being, a type of soldier. And the big thing that I always emphasize when I bring to new people is think about the equipment more so than the rule set. So if you're using foam, you can do foam games, and it's actually more versatile than people realize. If you have fencing gear, then you're going to be locked into fencing. HEMA has its own set of gear. Rattan SCA has its own set of gear. All right, I'm definitely falling behind. Okay, so my big one is Belagarth. That is using foam, fiberglass, strong cores wrapped in foam. The biggest one, though, is Amtgard by far, and that has a magic system. That has a character system. You get health points, you get some spell balls, you get character classes, but it is the biggest foam sport in the nation, as far as I can tell, globally. I do a stripped down version of Amtgard, which is called Belagarth, which has no magic systems. It has a very basic HP system. 1 hit on the torso, you're out. 2 hit on limbs, you're out. It's closer to a martial art, on the live action side of things than a role play side of things, but it still has role play elements. And inversely, Amtgard is still based on a full contact. You have to hit people. They do generate actually some really good fighters. So don't try to write off these different organizations as in like, oh, I'm tougher than that and I can do better than that. No, these even the LARPy LARPs, the ones that have magic, can still develop some really good fighters. All right. The equipment is real. You hit them, it works. The rules are made up. Once you have your gear, you can change the rules easily. Armor is really common because getting hit sucks, and a lot of the armor is actually armor grade. You can kind of like argue of what is minimum constitution of armor grade, but these things, like if somebody was wearing leather armor and I punched them in the leather armor, my hand would hurt. They would not. So I think the armor is very real. And I'm really big on Boffer foam LARPing. If you're curious in sports sword fighting, this is the cheapest and easiest and most diverse way to actually get into it. From here, you're going to spend like $100 to get some basic equipment, and then you can make a decision of what you like based off of your experiences there. While if you go into HEMA, it's like over $1,000. If you get into Buhurt, it's $5,000. So this is some pictures of the gear that you would get from Boffer LARPs. What the field fights look, some of the folks that I work with, and it's a big field fighting kind of style of fighting. There's a lot of people on the floor, on the field. Okay, so this is HEMA, historical European martial arts. This is most known with longsword fighting, but they do a whole bunch of different styles. These guys are, out of everything I'm talking about, the quote truest martial art, because they're actually trying to figure out how sword fighting actually worked, and they use a lot of historical manuscripts, and that's one of the big defining differences of HEMA versus other games that also may use metal sticks to hit each other, but these guys are actually looking at old historical fighting manuals from like Lichtenauer, Fiore, Fabrazzo, Talhofer, and then Harness-Fechten styles is something that I believe is more situated under HEMA, but Harness-Fechten I think would be worth mentioning, as it's supposed to be, quote, as true as possible style demo fighting, because they use full armor with actually sometimes sharpened steel swords. They do have certain rules to keep the safety of their participants, but that one is intentionally trying to be as realistic as possible, minus the murdering the person for reals. But they still may use sharp blades to figure, because sharp blades work a little differently, And I like HEMA for it has certain versatility. It's very competitive, very sporty, very versatile. They have like a partial historical system, partial modern synthetic system, which I really appreciate the flexibility in build philosophy instead of being strictly modern or strictly historical. And it allows for some unique fashions that the other sports don't really allow. And for my own fursuit project, I'm really hoping that it'll be for HEMA because I think it would be the best one to work within the rule purviews of. So here we have like the basic equipment of what it would look like. This is actually some of the cheaper equipment, believe it or not. This is based off of historical styles, and this is Dusok fencing. Dusok is a trainer system. That's why I use this photo. So HEMA arguably could say that it has some older roots. And then here's a couple of photos from some competitions. The upper one looks like small sword, and then the lower one is long sword fighting. All right. I really got to get through this. Now, I wanted to talk about how this technology is looking at the weapons, and the technology is a great way to determine what options you have available and what is like how it determines and affects the rules. So generally I largely very broadly say that there's three main technologies: steel, wood, and synthetics. And they interplay in the modern day in ways that make the game more fun, more accessible, and cheaper. You don't need to have a real blacksmith anymore unless if you really, really, really want to do steel fighting alone. So armor requirements and a lot of this, those are a huge consideration. Armors tend to not be cross-compatible between the different games, so the armor you tend to get locked in. Sometimes the weapons are a little bit more cross-compatible. I can use rattan weapons in one game versus another, but not necessarily the armors in one game versus another. A big consideration with weapons fighting is where is the protection? You have to protect yourself with weapons fighting because they are force multiplying tools, and you can easily hurt somebody. If with me and an 8-foot foam padded weapon, I can still concuss the hell out of somebody. With 8 feet of momentum, you can do real damage no matter how padded it is. So you have to have certain rules and thought processes to ensure the safety of combatants. So not only where's the armor, like is it on you, is it on the weapon? There's also rules of like don't hit them in the head, don't hit them in joints, or like even in Buhurt, you're not supposed to strike the opponent, like let's say the back of the knee, or to do a sideways strike to the head, because there has to be some basic safety rules so people don't actually die, which does occasionally happen. This is a very safe kind of sport, but you know, the biggest safety thing is also, if maybe not a surprise, heat stroke. They make the armor very protective, and then the armor itself is what ends up getting you in an extreme competition. All right. And I also wanted to point out this shield on the top there. If you looked at it long enough, that's not actually wood. That's using a foam and plastidip system. So there's also some synthetic, how should I say, alternatives to the same sort of solutions. All right. So steel, there's a lot of systems that use steel. You have rapier, you have longsword, you have steel fighters that use full body armor, and there's a lot of different styles, and there's still a lot of variability in what kind of steel weapons and steel armor you're really looking at. Okay. Come on. Okay, wood. Wood is a classic. Wood works. Wood is reliable, and wood is basis of a lot of these systems. At least what I call the backyard system. So, Kendo uses bamboo shinai, and traditionally they use lacquered wood as their armor. SCA, which starts with wood, rattan wood specifically. There's a lot of offshoots like the EMP or Adrian Empire. There's many more than just those two, but those are the ones that I actually worked in. And historical fencing practices, they tend to use wicker because it deforms and breaks, and so it protects the opponent. You have to keep remaking it, but it does work. And if you use wooden weapons like Dusoks, which is leather covered wood, then it also continues to protect the practitioners. All right, but wood is also very good. There's styles where even with a wooden stick you can defeat somebody in steel armor, so don't underestimate it. Okay. Foam and synthetic, I think that this gets a bad reputation because foam and synthetic stuff is really good. It's cheap, it's affordable, it can be very durable while providing safety. Don't let the aesthetics of it fool you because I get it, it looks awful, but it also is a very effective system. And I think that this is one of the more effective ways to introduce new fighters because it's cheap. It's easy. You don't have to worry about armor fitting you properly, the protections on the weapon itself, or if you, this stuff like here that they use for the Buhurt trainer kits, these are way cheaper. Like this the helmet's like 150, the torso padding is less than 100, and the weapons are like, let's say $50 each, and then with the rest of the padding you're looking at a startup cost of like $500 compared to thousands, right? And this is what a modern kind of Boffer kit looks like, where they have gloves that are synthetic. They might have some extra protection, like a gorget around the neck. I believe I had knee pads on this one. So this is just how modern kind of like foam fighters look like. All right. And bringing you into it, like, if this is something that interests you, what are the things that are actually important to you? Cost is generally a big consideration. Intensity is one that you need to have an honest conversation with yourself. Are you okay with getting concussion, or are you trying to stay concussion free as possible? Because then if the more you want to be protected, the intensity also changes. Because some sword fighting sports, you can pick your opponent up and drop them on the ground. Others, you're not even supposed to technically touch them at all. So there's a wide variability in terms of personal ability, personal comfort levels, goals of what you're trying to train. Because sometimes people want a sport, some people want a martial arts, some people just want friends, which I get. This is a hobby too. So there's some games are super dorky and are like they this would never work in a fight. Some of these people are straight up psychos who are trying to use real steel weapons sharpened on people who don't have armor that works very predictably. By the way, do wear some protection. Good life advice: wear protection, guys. And some are cultural for the parties. Right. It's no secret that these are social gatherings, so there's a way for people to make friends. There's a lot of camping, athletics, parties, and building intentional community. This is where if you guys know me on a personal level, I talk about intentional community a lot. This is the basis of me realizing that this is a thing that adults can do. You can just make something a central part of your life just because you want it. There doesn't have to really be a tremendous justification of like, there's some great honorable background or you're trying to build something significant. If you like it, you can just do it. And you can find friends who also like doing what you do. And you can build a community around that. And you're probably going to have a lot more fulfilled, rewarding life than trying to live up to some externally imposed standard of what is the best life to live. No, don't worry about that. Just live the life you want to live, and you find the people that help you set up that life. All right. And it would be amiss for me not to talk about furries in the sport. Y'all's are, of course, from the demographic we all take part in. This is the part that I really wish I had more time to do more research on. So I know that there's a couple more furs, but the only one that I know, there's a person named Swordwolf who does HEMA style fighting. I'm not sure how competitive they are. I'm mainly interested in the competitive scene, not so much the like role play or cosplay sort of scene. I do think he does fight, but I'm not really sure to what extent. I wanted to throw this one. This is, I believe, from the Voynich manuscript. I wanted to get the... Anyways, there are medieval furries, believe it or not. There is the lichen... it's like lichen folk or something. There's genres of medieval anthropomorphic arts. And I'm not even making this up. This is real. This is verified. The furry community, there's enough overlap that there are some specialized vendors to make LARP safe furry merchandise, and I'm not sure if they're suits, technically speaking, but furry kind of suit materials. And the main one that I know is Magpie Bones. They specialize in it, so there's obviously enough of a market of furries at Renaissance events that I can say from personal experience, every time you go to a Ren fair, there's going to be some furries there. All right. All right, 40, yeah. So this next slide, I wanted to also talk about this sport, these activities have been a huge part of my life. It has been, I've been doing it for 20 years, more or less continuously. There have been some down periods, and it had a tremendous impact on my life. And there have been some people who really had massive impacts on my life, and I wouldn't really be the same person I am now if I never crossed paths with them. So two of them in particular, I wanted to give in memoriam. Oh, I thought that was the last one. In memoriam, I had when I was young. Probably one of the first times in my life where I actually had a found family was the Las Vegas first Dagger Here scene, later Bellegarde scene. It doesn't matter the difference. There was a young man at the time named Josh. I knew him as King Cert. And he really pulled together a really interesting group of people. And one day he was murdered. By all accounts, it seemed to have been a life insurance scam. So that was somebody who was taken young and left an immeasurable shadow on the world by their absence. And yeah, King Cert is the one that I kind of live in memoriam for, in terms of shaping like how I try to interact with people and how I like run these communities. He was a really interesting guy and was taken far too soon from us. And then another one, though, who left an indelible impact on me was fencing Maitre Ivoriel, who was the head coach at the club I went to when I was living in Vegas. He was a head coach at Notre Dame for many years, about 20 years, if I remember correctly. And he's one of the reasons why I'm like a pretty decent fighter. You guys have never seen me fight, but I trained under Ivoriel for a number of years, and I was never, let's say, great, but he definitely made me a really, really solid all-around fighter. And for all the trainings and hours of sweat and physical misery, he did definitely make me quite a difficult opponent, you know. And Ivoriel passed away just last year, which is really, to me, crazy to think of. But I wanted to dedicate this lecture to these two. All right. And I wanted to leave on the last slide. These are just some resources. If you wanted to take like one photo, this would probably be it. These are just different games that I tried to think of. I put on Come Try LARP. It's a website dedicated towards helping people find resources to different groups and games. But these are all the different games I can think of that you probably have near you. This will require a little bit of Google searching on your part, but yeah, this is absolutely, these are the games that I would be looking at. And I have a history in the majority of these. I can talk about some of these. I don't. All right. So that's the end of the lecture, really. I definitely think I went over. This was all thrown together last minute. I hope you guys don't mind the multiple changes on this lecture. We had some last minute cancellations. So normally in a lot of these situations, I probably would have just canceled the lecture portion and just made this a meetup. But I've actually really wanted to make this lecture for a long time. So I threw this together in like 2 days less. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too unpolished, because there was not a lot of polished time here. Before I go off to the Q&A session, after this, when we go to the cool down world, I'm going to be showing some videos of the different styles of the sports. Due to logistical reasons, and including that we're streaming, I couldn't put any videos on the screen because, you know, copyrighted music or anything else would happen. But after this lecture, I'm going to be showing some videos of the different sports. All right, so let's get into the Q&A session. Like usual, if you have questions, just line up down here, hold this, and it'll amplify your voice. All right.
All right, I'm going to start. This was a super cool talk. I enjoyed learning more about your crazy hobbies. I'm curious, in your opinion, or your own experience, what the like distribution of weapons that people choose to use is. Like, aside from just, you know, basic sword.
Each one of these sports is something different. So with fencing, epee tends to be a little bit
specifically in yours.
Oh, I mean, I do all of these. I do half of these. I did epee and fencing, but so Belagarth, I'm gonna go with that one. It's going into that is actually a more complicated answer because there's a whole established culture and gameplay system. So the gameplay system is probably what predominates people's strategies, because there is a meta strategy of how to win this. This is a field group fight. So most people are encouraged to learn sword and boards, sword and shield first. Because that is the basis kind of what the meta is established on. But then you have people do pole arms. Those are very common because you feel powerful, man. It is cool wielding a 6 foot, 8 foot stick and just it is a great feeling. So people tend to use pole arms a lot. Longsword is a special has a special place in people's heart because in field fighting, it's not extremely effective, but it is so much fun. So you tend to have a lot of people with 5 foot two-handed swords. So just one big sword basically instead of a shield and a sword. And there's spears. Spears tend to be very common as well. And then if people don't want to be in direct combat, then archery or using javelins is common. But sword and board, definitely sword and board is the most common one. In fencing, it's probably foil. Which ones actually have some? Most of these would be sword and board, shield and sword. Even with Buhurt, they tend to have a small shield that you can punch people with and a sword, which they don't use the sword. They just punch while holding a sword. It's a lot of punching. And then they have each team has 1 or 2 polearm users, but the polearm has some issues in grappling. So sometimes it's better to have 2 hands instead of 1 stick with 2 hands on it in grappling situations.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation. It was really, really interesting. I was actually wondering, so you mentioned, I think I remember correctly, at Buhurt that people basically fight until they lay down on the ground.
Yes.
So I was wondering about the armor that people wear. Like, I know that like helmets for motorcycles, they're like one and done. Like if you fall once, then like the helmet is done. It doesn't provide any protection anymore. How is that the case in like armor at like these fighting events? Like I'm assuming like there are rules that don't allow hitting the head and stuff. But yeah, I would like to.
They definitely allow head strikes. So there's more protections on the rules for attacking joints, specifically. And it's more of like side strikes to the knee or back of the knee. Basically, like try to hit the knee, not as much. Side strikes to the head, although down from up down, totally fine. Doing it from the side can cause neck damage, basically. So there are some, and I'm on this slide because this helmet gives a good the side view. You see that there's really thick bars in front of it. Now, this is a wolf's rib helmet, and they kind of this is not exactly the safest helmet because there's some gaps, and occasionally people do get hit. Even with the weapons are blunted, but you get hit full force with a blunted weapon, you're still getting really hurt if you don't have armor. Let's see, where's the Buhurt? Okay, but these guys generally have really heavy gear. I'm going to stick over here. So you have from head to toe. You have sabatons, shins, knee. You have your leg. You have your cuirass, and you have your arms. You have your head armor. So everything is covered from head to toe. Notice there are some gaps though. So, but you're not really supposed to strike at those gaps. Some of those gaps are more inevitable because, like the groin area, you can't actually cover in armor, not effectively. There are armors that do, but they're very expensive and there's downsides. But yeah, they have to wear the strongest protection. They also can't forget they have under armor, so their cuisses and gambeson. Those are because the armor, the steel will deflect the energy, but if there's nothing to dampen it underneath it, it'll transfer the energy through because it's largely inelastic. So that's what the gambeson is used. But basically, this is another way to say is that this is actually more protective than historical armor because it's tournament armor. There is historical tournament armor, which would be very similar to modern Buhurt armor. But yeah, it's actual armor. That's how they protect themselves. It is. You could take a sharp steel blade to it, and there's more risks, but like the armor will hold up just fine against a sharp blade. It's just now the sharp blade can get between gaps, and you can actually kill them.
Crazy. Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely. This stuff's expensive. Other people will say, give different numbers. I say that a suit of armor for Buhurt is $5,000. That's an upper estimate. But when it comes to this sort of sport, I don't like promising people low price points. Just expect to spend $5,000 before you're on the field.
Hello. Awesome presentation. Loved it. I was wondering where like jousting fits into this, as well as if there's any other like adjacent hobbies or events that you find really interesting.
Yeah. So jousting is absolutely part of the culture. It is just something that I myself haven't done. It is no secret that equestrianism is expensive. So jousting definitely has a reputation of being on the upper class end of these hobbies. I like pushing foam because it is something you can self-start and make yourself to be really cheap. Jousting is absolutely not that at all. You have to get a horse. You have to take care of the horse. The armor is even more expensive than the Buhurt armor. And yeah, it just costs oodles of money. But where is it? It's at Renaissance fairs. Renaissance fairs, out of all the sports that I talked about, it holds a special part of that. Is the Renaissance fairs are the meta communities of these communities. Once you're actually part of the Renaissance fair circuit, you realize that it's actually like, let's say, 100 different guilds, houses, games, organizations, all coming together to take part in a similar enough culture and also make money, right? It is a commercial event. So with the jousting, they tend to go to Ren fairs because it helps justify the cost of it. The Ren fairs will actually put forth the effort to put a jousting field in, which does take a lot of time and space and a decent amount of money. So Ren fairs, I would say, is where they do it. However, the jousting organizations, they are their own organizations. I don't know what they're called off the top of my head. That should be an easy Google, though. They have their own events and practices, right? But practice is sometimes a little different than giving a show. It's like any martial art. When you see them practicing, they're doing the basic things over and over and over to get good. And then when they're actually doing a tournament or a show, that's where they're doing a lot more flashy, more dynamic stuff. And the same thing is true for jousting. Yep.
Thank you.
Let's just say I've never gotten into this before. What would be my first day's experience? I don't know what I'm doing. I definitely want to be part of it. I want to do a thing. What would I be expecting the very first day someone like you would invite me into an adventure like this?
So let's say it's a brick and mortar club. Some of these meet in parks, some of these meet in people's backyards, but let's say we're an established group. So you're going to a building, you would be introducing yourself to people. The first thing they would have you do is sign a waiver and probably talk over basic considerations and what would be considered etiquette in these spaces. Every martial art has some somewhat unique code of etiquette to follow. Oftentimes it's stuff like don't wear shoes on the mat. After you're done, shake hands or show respect to your opponent. And you know, like, and maybe they'll go over some safety deal. And then usually what I've noticed is that if it's your first time, then they'll just go through some sort of basic exercise or basic training. Some of these groups may have some sort of assessment system if you are if you have some sort of background. Otherwise, they will just have you do some basic stuff. And most of these groups with new fighters, they want the new fighters to fight. So sometimes it's more regimented where they want to go through a whole exercise routine first, go through some drills, and then you fight. Some of these groups will be like, all right, let's just throw you in and see how you do. And then they may give you structured feedback based off how you do it. So yeah, basically, if you're new to Fight Club, welcome to Fight Club. Please tell everybody about Fight Club. We hope you have a fun time. And you will have to fight.
Sounds good.
Okay, I have one more quick one. What's the worst injury you've sustained at Bellegarth?
Okay, I'm going to give two stories. One is the worst one that I've sustained, and the other one is from what I've seen with other people. So one day I was doing some basic. It was a basic practice at my Vegas group. We had about 20-ish people on the field that day. We were doing a capture the flag style event, and somebody was trying to get our team's flag. I just respawned, so I was sitting on the sidelines, and then when I respawned, I started sprinting as fast as I can in order to intercept the person trying to get the flag. Somebody else on the other team saw me do that, knew what I was going to do, and they had a spear, so they come running over and they throw a spear. They miss me in the front, and then it goes on the ground and kind of sticks in the ground. And I am still sprinting. This happened in such a way that I didn't have the time to like jump over it or respond to it. So all I basically did, again, the spear is now stuck in the ground. While sprinting, I just kicked the spear with my shin really super hard. I didn't break my leg, but I couldn't really walk on that leg for a few days, and it was very tender, and I got it was like mid shin, so everything beneath it got really swollen. Like it was really bad. And I had to buy a dedicated soccer like shin guard just to protect it, because again, I didn't break it because I was able to walk on the leg sort of, but I definitely did some damage to the bone, maybe cracked the bone, maybe bruised it. I never went to the doctors because it wasn't broken, but that hurt. Now, in terms of injuries that I've seen on the fields, like I said earlier, the most dangerous thing is heat stroke. People have died on the field from heat stroke. So don't underestimate that risk, especially when you're wearing not just a sweater, that is your gambeson, you're also wearing armor on top of a sweater, right? Furries are not the only ones who deal with heat stress while wearing suits. But the ones that I've seen in person, basically either take your pick, spiral fracture in the shin or dislocation of the knee, like full-blown sideways movement of the knee, you know? Yeah, ACL tears are common. Yeah, there's in these sports, they're not crazy dangerous, but they do have a decent amount of chance of risk and injury. I've been fairly lucky myself. I have some chronic injuries, but nothing that was extremely stupendous. Like I got tennis elbow, I have a hip dysplasia thing. My rotator cuffs get damaged probably more frequently than they should. I had arthritis, and I had like a type of arthritis in my hands for a while. I just had actual diagnosed arthritis in my foot, which I got a stem cell injection for. So this definitely wears on the body on the long term. That's the other side of the injuries, is the long term accretion kind of injuries. Yep.
Guessing not as bad as just sitting at home 24/7.
You say that, but occasionally one of these people with their helmets, they get like an axe like through the visor or whatever, or a blade breaks. In fencing, there was a couple of deaths in Olympic fencing, you know, the guys with the metal sticks, swords. It was because the blade broke while they're mid lunge and it went through the armpit and then basically pierced the heart.
Oof.
Yeah, so that killed like 3 fencers in history, if I remember correctly. in sport fencing history.
Okay.
At least the more interesting way to go than the usual modern deaths.
Yeah, right.
A cool way to go. True.
Imagine dying from like a sedentary lifestyle. That's kind of lame, dude.
That's so true.
Yeah.
True.
Stab
And some of the old historical fencing deaths is pretty lame too, because antibiotics wasn't a thing. You get a small cut in your chest, and you're like, "Ah, I won. I'm fine." 2 weeks later, they're dead from sepsis.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dead because a bad guy bit you.
Yeah.
And these days, it's just nothing antibiotics could do. Dude was decapitated on the spot.
Could have tried applying them anyways.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I mean, it's
Any
for
other
helping
questions?
infections, I guess.
All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, thank you very much for this. This is definitely a passion presentation. I do encourage other people in DGen Tech, if they have some sort of passion in their life. I get it that we're here for being technical furries, but if you have something that you know, like a strange amount in, and you just really want to have a community to share it with, we absolutely would love to have you on stage. After this, when we go to our cooldown world, I'm going to take a few minute break. I'm going to go to a cooldown world, and I'm going to start showing videos of the different sports just to show like how they actually look like in action, because I hate turning a fighting thing into an academic thing. Fighting is an action. You do it, you practice it, you become it. You don't learn it. All right.
Yay.
So, thank you.
Clap, 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 clap.
Clack, 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 clack.
Good job.
It's so over.